Well, welcome back. We are here officially for our May Ridiculously Amazing Agent podcast. Scott, Dave, how are you doing today?
I'm doing excellent.
I'm doing great too.
Perfect, perfect. So today's topic is a little bit on how to avoid getting an objection. So last time we did how to handle one and embrace it, like Dave likes to say, he likes to embrace a concern. He doesn't like to call it an objection. So
Right.
like I don't use busy. He doesn't use the word objection. So we're going to learn how to avoid a concern like a ninja today on this podcast. But before we kick that off, Scott, where are you going here this May?
Gee, May's shaping up to be nice and busy. Colorado, I better bring my skis along. Well, maybe the season's wrapping up, but I think there's a little bit of time left, Kelly. Also, some scheduled trips to Florida, Indiana, Oklahoma, all over.
Woohoo!
That is a world tour. And how about you, Dave?
I am spending some time back in Montana, a different client up there, mid-month. Headed down to Tennessee, first time that I've ever been to Tennessee, headed down there for a little while. And then I'm spending a week up in the Great White North at an agency up in Newfoundland, in an office in Nova Scotia as well. Doing a big assessment up there. So a little bit going on. Get the first half of the month that I had off, but now we're kind of getting into it.
Are you going to start using the word about instead of about?
I'm not sure. We'll see. I mean, I don't have the Boston accent, so I'm not sure that I'm going to pick up the Canadian one either.
All right. And I'm heading to Nashville to speak at a mastermind group, so that's going to be really exciting. We're going to talk all about branding. Then I go meet Scott in the wonderful Colorado. I'm there for a whole week. And guys, you forgot about axe throwing.
I didn't forget.
That's the highlight of my May. We're going to do a company trip where we're going to drink a lot of beer and throw axes, hopefully not at each other.
Right, I was going to say that.
Not a good look. I did watch a YouTube video where somebody threw axes and it bounced back, like hit something. So
stand far enough away from the target.
I'm just going to bump the life insurance a little bit. I'm speaking, then the next week I'm speaking at the great Kevin Painter's SNA group down in Georgia. Going to do some commercial training with Grinnell, a great carrier relationship that we have. And then actually I'm taking a week off the road.
Good
I know.
for you.
Good for you.
Well, my husband's traveling and someone needs to be the dog sitter. So
Yep.
not only am I a week off the road, but it's a week in the house completely by myself. So it's like a luxurious, glamorous vacation.
That's great. But you're going to miss your husband terribly. We know.
Oh, I will miss him. But I also miss having the house to myself a lot
Yes.
too.
That'll be nice.
You guys have kids. You guys know it's like having the house all alone is like a glamorous, well-kept secret that no one knows about.
I couldn't even tell you what that's like.
You do it all day long when you're working, but imagine not having to work. And then it's like we heading down to Indiana to go to a client. So Chris Catherine all over the place, having some fun. But let's dive into the meat and potatoes. And Dave, I'd love for you to kind of explain, because I think you sort of opened my eyes to the whole idea of avoiding a concern, because we don't use the word objection, but
Right.
avoiding a concern. So tell me a little bit about your philosophy and how you train agencies on how to avoid a concern.
Sure. Well, the first point that I always like to make is I feel like when we use the term avoid, it's like we're trying to get away with something. We're trying to go around something. So when we say avoid a concern, if the concern or the objection is raised, we're going to attack it. This is in no way saying, okay, when they, if they bring up an objection, just hang up the phone. It's not about after the objection comes. It's about positioning ourselves so the clients don't even think of an objection. And so that they're so ready to move forward with us that they don't say, well, let me look at the price. Let me think about it. Let me. They don't even get to that point. So avoiding the objection is just preventing it from arising at all. So I want to be clear with that, because I think when we first start talking about avoiding objections, people think after the objection is raised. And we're actually avoiding the situation completely. So I think that...
Would it be safe to say, Dave, that like a great analogy of this in life is that if you know your wife has had a bad day at work, it's a really good idea to avoid an argument by maybe doing the laundry and maybe making dinner or taking her out to dinner. And so you avoid an argument because you know what you know in advance you can prepare for.
Exactly. Wine and flowers. Yes. Absolutely. Yeah, no, I think that's a great way.
Insurance.
And it's the same thing. It's not that like if she brings up, that she had a bad day, you want to be there and you want to have that discussion, but you'd rather just completely like have a different night, so to speak. But to me, the number one thing I think that you can do to set yourself up for the most amount of success in this area is, number one, you need to have a sales process. Okay, most agencies that we go into, larger producers will have it. An owner will tell me they don't have a sales process, but then when we start talking about it, he goes, "I do this, and then I do this, and then I do this, and then I do this," and I go, "Well, that's a sales process." What a lot of owners don't do is they don't do a good job of translating that down to the staff. So often, whether it's a producer or an owner, a longtime producer, a longtime owner, he or she's been doing it for so long, they've developed the sales process, but they haven't translated that down to the staff. And this can be very difficult when it comes to the objections, because a good sales process will eliminate the objections from being raised at all. So then they're not in a position to help their staff when they come to the objection. So a lot of what this comes down to is making sure we have a good, strong sales process, following that sales process, and then making sure that we're making our tweaks and our adjustments, what's going right, what's going wrong. Because if we put people on the right path, they're ultimately going to make the right decision. And to me, that's what a sales process brings to the table.
I think that's really valid points. And one of the things I know that we talk a lot about, and I think Scott's going to chime on in here, is that one of the best ways to avoid a concern is to really spend some time building rapport, so that it's much more of a, like, I've got a question, then your price is too high, so you buy. I think that a great way would be like, well, that's a little higher. Is there any way we can get that down, Scott? I think that's what you're trying to say, is how can we turn like a hard objection into maybe more and softening people to get to a question, right?
Sure.
Right.
So Scott, how do we do that?
Well, it's interesting that you would think that building rapport might come a little more naturally to people in an environment that are on the phone talking to folks all day long, but it can be easy to just, I think, get into thinking about all the things you have to do when you get off that call, and other things that are sitting on your desk, perhaps the transactional portions of the call that you're wanting to make sure you get through those things. Perhaps that's what's going through people's minds, because when I listen to calls, when I help people with calls, I find that they tend to be overwhelmingly transactional and have very little rapport. As a matter of fact, our secret shopper calls, we've looked at our stats, and 62.5% of the calls, people are feeling these are very transactional. The callers that are rating the calls, they're transactional. There's not common ground being found on the call. So it's important to get to know people, not just to get right into the transaction. If you make it too transactional, they're not going to be comfortable asking questions. Perhaps you're not pausing to ask, were there any questions about this particular part of the call or not? And as you find common ground with folks, if someone calls and maybe you jump on the call and they're upset immediately, even empathizing right away and saying, I understand being surprised by increases like this. I get frustrated when that's the case too. But the good news is I'm here to go through that with you today. I'm here to walk through and find a solution. So why don't we take a look at that together? And you're kind of putting yourself in their shoes, and then getting to know them and being a little informal, appropriately informal yet professional is key. I've heard calls where there's something mentioned about a vacation, or not being able to stay on the call too long because I've got to go to my kid's soccer game or something like that. And the agents just keep moving along, making it transactional, and don't even mention some of these things. Like, oh, that sounds like a great afternoon. Yeah, we'll move right along with this and get you off to your soccer game, and have a little light laughter and get to like each other and know each other a little bit, because people, again, are going to want to work with and buy insurance from people, and really not just buying a policy, but buying the person. If you build rapport effectively throughout the call, when you get to the end and you have to ask for the business and maybe overcome some other objections at the end, there's a little bit more of a relationship, and I think it does soften it for that part of the process.
I think too, one key factor is it's so easy to tell someone no that you don't care about at all. Like, no, I'm good, thanks.
Right.
You keep moving around and bumping around. If you actually like the person and learn something about the agent, you shared some common ground, it's actually much harder for most people to just reject that person.
Right.
And I think we miss that a lot because, and Scott, how do you overcome the idea? Because I get this a lot, Dave. I don't know. I think we've talked about that. You get this sometimes too, where people get kind of ghost white and they just say, no one's got time. Everybody just wants to get off the phone. They don't want to deal with their insurance. I just need to get down to basics, do my job, and get them the quote. And what would you tell an agent that's facing that?
Go ahead, Dave.
I was just going to say, I think that there's an assumption there when people say that. So everyone wants to know who they're buying from, especially, if we're talking about small or personal lines or small commercial stuff that we're doing over the phone, where we haven't had the chance to shake their hand, look them in the eye. There's not a lot of video meetings going on in this situation. It's just a lot of phone calls. Explaining who I am and building that rapport is an excellent way to make sure that we aren't taking these assumptions that people don't want to get off the phone, because really what it is it's that self-fulfilling prophecy. If I think they don't want to spend time on the phone with me, then I'm going to create a scenario where they don't want to spend time on the phone with me. And I think that the relationship is one piece of that. And then I think the other side is making sure throughout the call that you're showing your expertise. So we want to make sure that we're building that relationship, but we're also demonstrating our expertise to build trust. Because just like you said, it's very easy to say no to somebody who I don't have a relationship with. It's also easy to say no to somebody who I don't really believe knows what they're talking about. But people buy from those that they like and that they trust. So throughout the call, we want to build that rapport, demonstrate that expertise. When it comes to time passed for the business, I don't really have any real objections here. I like you. You've shown me that you know what you're talking about. Why wouldn't I move forward with you? I always say the worst kept secret in our industry, people really don't want to deal with their insurance. So if we can make it simple, easy, demonstrate we're the right person, they're going to move forward. And that doesn't mean we should rush through it, but we take the time to demonstrate that, slow down to speed up, 1 step backwards, 2 steps forward, whatever analogy you want to use there, all gets us to that end goal.
No, I like that because, I think that when you get that pushback, I always tell people honor your own process. They called you. Right. And so don't get into their trap within the first 30 seconds. They're looking for you to give value. They're looking for you to impress them. If you don't impress them in those 30 seconds, you've made it a transaction and you can play that game. But you have to impress them in 30 seconds so that they do warm up to you. And I don't think we treat it like we're going to people please that caller versus give them a performance of their lifetime to show them how awesome we are.
Right.
Sure.
We know where we need to get to. We know how to get there. So if we're going to get there, we have to be driving the bus. We have to control it. We let them drive the bus, they're not going to get to where we need to get to. Right? It's that simple.
And sometimes, Kelly, I think when we say things like, is this a good time? Or do you have time to go through this? I think the natural response in lieu of value is, you're right. I want to get off the phone. I don't want to talk about this too much longer. And if we avoid those things and just say something like, as I am processing this payment, for example, I always like to provide just a brief review of coverage to see if I can enhance your policy, provide even more complete coverage. And I want to make sure I do that for all my clients. So why don't we get started with this? And, and then you're sharing value and you are extending the process a little for them, but it's about them.
But I think they also outlined a process, to Dave's point about a sales process. Like people like to know where they are in the process. That also helps keep people engaged. If you're not telling people what the process is, they have no idea if it's in their 30 seconds or 5 hours. And you have to be able to control that and tell people what's going to happen. But one thing I learned early on, it's always stuck with me, is that there's also the idea of putting the concerns directly into your sales process. Mm-hmm. Because so many times people will not give you a concern. Like there's the idea that you can't embrace a concern if you get ghosted, right? So if you're trying to call them back to give a quote and they never call you back, that's because you didn't do your job to build rapport and trust, right? If you get a quote and they'll say, I'll think about it, and they never talk to you again, you've been ghosted. You didn't even get to embrace or, their concern. It's why we're trying to talk about ways to avoid that. But the main thing you got to think about is how do we put those concerns directly in place so that we can talk about them up front? And by doing that, you really leave that caller, the buyer, no opportunity to use them against you, right? So little things like asking, are there any other decision makers? Well, now they can't use that against you at the end where it says, I've talked to my spouse or I've talked to my business partner. It's like, oh, well, we had talked about this. You said you were the sole decision maker. When can we get them involved? And, now they have a little egg on their face. So doing these things, and, the common ones are, I need to talk to somebody else. I need to think about it. And you can avoid that one by saying, when do you want to make your decision before they can give you that concern, right? What are some of the other ones? I need to think about your price is too high, right?
Yeah, and the price one I think is easy. If you early on you use my favorite phrase, which is other than price, why did you call me today? Right? So now they have to give something. And now some people are going to be adamant. It's price. All I care about is price, price, price. Well, that's good. Now I know that. Now I can either, number one, decide that's not the way somebody I want to do business with and go down that path. Or, no, it's all about price. So you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to keep you on the phone. I'm going to spend 10 minutes with you. I'm going to get you my lowest price. You're either going to buy it, you're not going to buy it, and I'm going to move on. But if we go through the whole process and they're telling me I'm worried about coverage and I'm worried about this and that, when we get to the end, if I'm a couple of dollars more because I showed you the value in increasing the coverage and we added these endorsements on and all of that, then the client can't really come back with, well, I don't want to go with you because you're too high. Well, no, we talked about this already. You said coverage was more important to you than price. We made these decisions. And the other nice part about that too is that another good tip in terms of avoiding the objection is to allow the client to build the policy with you, so that if they do get to the end, they're like, oh, it seems a little higher. It's like, well, you invested the time in this. You said you wanted the higher limit. You said you wanted the lower deductible. And then that also gives you the opportunity to play with those.
And I think another way to overcome that objection, which we're big advocates for, is when you're quoting someone to give people options. So again, we're going to avoid that objection because we've given them 3 price points to discuss.
Right.
And so now they can pick the one that's right for them. So you can avoid, that's a great example, I think, of having a sales process designed to avoid your top objections.
Yeah.
And I think the key to all this, guys, and it's the key to everything in life, it starts with a con and ends with consistency.
Yeah.
So a lot of times we do it. So there's a great phrase saying, it works so well, we're probably not going to do it again. And so you have to have ways to really practice your sales process, audit your sales process, really get in tune with it so you know what's happening routinely and consistently to drive a result. And then you can tweak certain things in to see if you can get a better result. But I think that these are all really great ways to avoid objections or concerns. And then, then we can kind of make sure that you're always structuring your sale to be efficient and effective for everybody. So final thoughts, guys. Dave, Scott, do you have any final thoughts on how to avoid concerns?
I do. I have one more thing that I had written down here. We talk about asking for the business a lot in the sales process. And to me, this becomes crucial in avoiding the objection. We need to ask for the business in a way that gives them an option, but where both options are yes. So if I say, do you want to move forward today? I'm giving them a yes/no option. If I say the one I hate the most is, do you have any questions? You know what people think when I say, do you have any questions? They go, oh, I'm supposed to have questions. And then they come up with some kind of question, or I'm literally saying, can you give me some objections? Because I want to practice overcoming them. So there's a few that I like, and I'll just give you one of my favorite ones here is, so after you get through everything, you present it, say something along the lines of, would you like me to email you the application so that you can print it out, sign it, and scan it back to me? Or would it be easier if I just set you up in our e-signature program? So I'm doing 2 things. I'm kind of giving them options. I'm certainly steering them to the easier one and the one I want them to take. But even if they take the first one, or they say, well, can I just come down and sign it? They're like, but both options are, yes, I'm going to sign it. Not like, oh, do you want to think about it? Can I call you next week? All of those things. So come up with some script that you're comfortable with that gives them options, that doesn't invite the objection. Now, people have concerns. They're still going to raise them at this point. We just don't have to invite them in. So that's my final thought, because that's the last thing we need to do before we get to the sale. Ask for the business.
I like it. How about you, Scott?
As you're building rapport, as you're going through your sales process, I guess I could add one more thing. Really connect the dots between the features of the particular policies that you're discussing or what you're trying to upsell or cross-sell. Connect the dots between the features and the needs of that person and discuss them through the rapport building, and maybe even find common ground on some of those things, because then you're really painting a picture for people that it may be, if price is an issue, well, maybe there's some options, as we were saying, but at least they have a picture of what they're maybe saying no to, a little bit more than just going through a lot of transactional details and features, rather than really getting that picture of how those features really could meet a direct need in their life, something they could see and feel.
And I'll lead it home with, I think everyone should buy our Apex sales program to get this into your agency.
I agree.
If you guys don't know, we have a 6-month training program. One of us comes out to your agency twice during that time. There's biweekly sales meetings. We're going to track your closing ratio. We're going to have workbooks, scripts, role playing, all the stuff that's really uncomfortable.
We're going to build a sales process.
We're going to build and install.
Yes.
It won't just be a sales process that's on a nice piece of paper that no one looks at.
Yes.
So if you're looking to get that done and breathe a little spark of life, everything from producers to people who service and sell have been through it. So definitely let us know. We'd be happy to help you guys with that. So we'll catch you on the next podcast. Thank you, Dave and Scott. And for our loyal listeners, thanks for listening, and check out our Apex sales program.
Thanks all.